Hey, how's it going out there in YouTube land? My name's Shard. This is 1 Foot of Books, episode 7, I believe. This is a series where I go through my book collection behind and around me and just go exploring through it. I just kind of go to a shelf and measure out 1 foot or 30 centimeters worth of books, because anything more is probably going to take too long. You know, I'd love to do like a book tour, bookshelf tour kind of video, but I don't know, probably take too long. I'll get too caught up in it, you know. And but anyway, it's just 1 foot. I measure out a foot, talk about the foot of books. So yeah, sit back, enjoy, grab a cup of coffee, cup of tea. Got any comments, comment below, all that stuff. Good coffee. Alright, I got this from a paperback shelf. No big hardcovers today. So these are all softcover paperback editions. I'm going to start at the top here, like I always do. Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics. A classic of the self-help genre. This rather beat up edition belonged to a woman named Shirley Watts. And it's pretty old, this one. This is a 1980 edition. Originally published in 1970, the old Psycho-Cybernetics. If you're into your self-help and stuff like that, Psycho-Cybernetics, Maxwell Maltz, very well worth it. Very influential. A lot of stuff that he wrote about has just been kind of endlessly repeated in self-help circles. Maltz was a plastic surgeon by training, and kind of came to this conclusion. He was working on people's looks with plastic surgery, and he kind of discovered that when people thought that they were attractive, then it kind of, you know, it kind of worked in other facets of their life. And so it was all about kind of building up people's self-confidence. Not that plastic surgery kind of made people confident all the time. It was just a means to an end. But yeah, pretty cool book. I've read through a few times. Very well worth it if you're into your self-help, self-improvement, that kind of thing. Like I said, it's very influential. It's a classic. It's right up there with, you know, Win Friends and Influence People, you know, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a classic. It's a classic, and it's well worth a read. Probably get it yourself there. You see it around all the time. Go to any kind of op shop, secondhand bookshop. They should have a copy. Try not to get one as bad as this, but this is kind of cool. I like this. I like this copy because it's so old and battered, and it's still hanging in there. And I do like this book. I've got another book of his as well, which is like just full of affirmations and little stories and stuff like that. It's called Thoughts to Live By, and that's another great little book as well. That was in my bathroom for a good long time. Just one of those books you kind of plonk down, you pick it up, and you go, oh yeah, enlightenment on the crapper. So I think that's probably where it comes, you know. Yeah. Iris Murdoch, Sartre, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Of course, the famous French existentialist philosopher, a little biography written by Iris Murdoch, who is a great writer. I've read a couple of her fiction books from back in the 50s, A Severed Head, and another one of hers. She was an awesome writer, man. I haven't read this book, but I got it because it was written by Iris Murdoch, and I'm like, I want to see what she writes about Sartre, but I still haven't read this book. It's pretty old. It looks to me to be like a 70s edition. 1977, yeah. Originally published 1953. That's when Iris Murdoch was kind of active, 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Still haven't seen that movie about her called Iris. But yeah, I'll read that one day. I do like Iris Murdoch. If you ever see any Iris Murdoch books around in an op shop or cheap, buy them, give them a read. You won't be disappointed. She was a really great writer. And yeah, just, yeah, that's all I can say. She was a great writer. Check her out. I recommend Iris Murdoch. But Dusty. Some more Wilhelm Reich. Character analysis. This is from the same kind of run of books. I've got about 3 of these in this kind of edition. Maybe 4, actually. I lent a couple out. I've got to go get them back off a friend of mine. This was published in 1984, originally published 1972. Wilhelm Reich he was an interesting dude. If you haven't heard of him, check out a documentary series on YouTube by Adam Curtis, The Century of the Self, one of the great documentary series from the early 2000s. Adam Curtis, I'm a huge fan. He was a contemporary of, and a student of Freud, Sigmund Freud, and kind of moved away from Freud's theories and practices and started out on his own, which kind of fed into the 1950s beatniks and 60s free love kind of thing. He was dead by then, but he kind of made headlines with the study of this substance. Is it a substance called orgone? And he made a thing called an orgone box, which he claimed could cure cancer, amongst many other things. And it's basically, it's like an outhouse box kind of thing, and alternate layers of, like, I think metal and fibrous material, like, you know, metal and natural. And apparently, he made a cloud buster, which used orgone energy to dissipate clouds. Very kind of, out there guy. Very out there guy. He wrote a treatise on, like, the rise of Nazism, the mass psychosis of fascism, which is another heavy book. I haven't read this book. A character analysis, too heavy. Wilhelm Reich is one of the heaviest writers I've ever attempted to read. This, like, it's probably 300-400 pages. Heavy books of Wilhelm. So what happened to Wilhelm? He moved to Brooklyn, and after World War II, and started trying to get orgone off the ground, orgone boxes, that kind of thing. The FDA, I believe it was, or one of those government organizations, arrested him, put him in jail, went to his lab, workshop, got all his papers, all his work, burned it, and then he died 6 days and being held in jail. Yeah, and no matter what this guy was doing, if orgone was quackery, I haven't heard of anyone getting their papers burned by a federal administration in America. Not for being stupid, not for being wrong, not for being dangerous. They don't try to wipe you out like they did with Reich. Robert Anton Wilson wrote a lot about Reich and wrote a play called Wilhelm Reich in Hell, which is all about Reich's kind of life and then strange death and his treatment by US authorities. But anyway, yeah, Wilhelm Reich, if you see any of his books around, and if you're a fan of his, buy them. They're getting hard to find. I got this from the Salvos in Marrickville, where I got my other ones too. Kind of, they drip fed them in there for a while, and I just snapped them up, man, because you can't find this stuff. If you do find it brand new, it's expensive. You find them second hand, if people know what they've got, it's expensive. But yeah, I'm very grateful to have these books, and though I haven't read them, I haven't delved deep into them, I do love having Wilhelm Reich material. It's special stuff, man. Ursula K. Le Guin, one of my favorite writers. This is from Urchin Books in Marrickville. Worlds of Exile and Illusion. This has got 3 little kind of, not short stories, not quite novellas, not quite novels, but It's got City of Illusions, Planet of Exile, and Rokanan's World. If you've read any Guin, she started a loose cycle of works. Even she hastened to call it a cycle, called the Hainish cycle. And it kind of started with the Left Hand of Darkness, kind of, worked its way through other stories, the Dispossessed, and it's like just kind of like this unfolding of a birth of a galactic civilization. And I haven't read all the books in this cycle, but these 3 books, City of Illusion, Planet of Exile, Rokanan's World, are all from that cycle. All 3 of these books are great. Planet of Exile especially kind of lodged itself into my brain. That was a great story. The thing with the Hainish cycle is that all these different planets, all these different worlds in this universe that are slowly getting connected are all at different stages of evolution. And in Planet of Exile, I think it's a scientist is being kind of marooned on this medieval kind of world for a long time, waiting for a ship to come, but he gets caught up in all these rituals and processes of the natives and stuff like that. And cool book, man. Le Guin wrote a lot about anthropology and had this kind of anthropological perspective on history and making and creating worlds around from that kind of point of view. And I really appreciate that in her writing. And yeah, Planet of Exile really brings it out. And another book of hers, Always Coming Home, which I read about half of. Was awesome until I kind of just, it's another heavy book, just lots going on, and she started writing lots of songs in it, and I was just kind of like, songs and books, I don't know, they don't work for me. Turn me off The Two Towers, turn me off Always Coming Home. But yeah, anything by Ursula K. Le Guin, I'd say read it. If you haven't read any of her stuff, start with Left Hand of Darkness or The Dispossessed. Some other ones I've read, but even this little collection, Worlds of Exile and Illusion, fantastic, great reads, only a couple of 100 pages each, if that. Yeah, great books. Ursula K. Le Guin, for the win. Karen Armstrong, Mohammed, a biography of the Prophet. I haven't read this. I got this from, I think it was the Red Cross shop in Marrickville when it was opened. That was a good 13 years ago. It's 2001 edition, originally published 1991. I studied religion in university, and Islam always had I studied the big 5, as you do in university. And Islam is a very interesting religion. Muhammad was a very interesting character. Can I even call him a character? Very interesting person. I got this. I haven't read it yet. It's been hanging around for years. I don't know, maybe I should get rid of it. I don't know. Yeah. But it seems pretty comprehensive. I don't know, what do you think? Stay or go? Mahmoud. Oh, this is a great book too. Studs Terkel. If you've never heard of Studs Terkel, he was a great kind of everyman writer. Like a journalist. Just kind of wandered around the States collecting stories. He was on Democracy Now! A few times before he died. And this is a great book called Working. And it's, even though it was published back in 1974, this is the 1985 edition, it was published in 74, but basically he goes around just collecting stories of work from people. And it's beautiful. And the people he talks to are amazing, even though they're just bus drivers or waitresses or just, white collar, blue collar, doesn't care what color your collar is. He comes and talks to these people, and it's amazing. Some people hate their jobs. Most people, back when he wrote this, loved their jobs, loved having security, that kind of thing. And I think we've kind of gone backwards a little bit now. But this is a great book. I've read this. Again, this was a bathroom book for me for a while, because it's just little interviews that he does, and you just pick it up, read an interview, put it down, go about your day. Fantastic book. I've seen it around at one other place. I got this at the Salvos in Marrickville. I've seen it again. I think I saw it at Reverse Garbage in Marrickville before they moved. Great book. Great book. It's the only Studs Terkel I've got. I love that name, Studs. What kind of cool name is that? Hey man, what's your name? Studs. Awesome. Studs Terkel. He's a very prolific American writer. Check out his stuff. I love this book. Love it. Some more Neville Drury. Another book of his I haven't read, but I got. Neville Drury was a writer of kind of, you know, left field consciousness expanding stuff back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in Australia. This is one that's called Echoes from the Void. It is a collection of his essays around those things. Archetypes and Belief Systems, Carl Jung and John Lilly, the Tarot and Transformation, The Magic of Austin Spare. If you don't know who Austin Spare is, check him out. The Supernatural World of Rosalie Norton. If you don't know who Rosalie Norton is, especially if you're not in Australia or New Zealand, go and check out Rosalie Norton. She was a very interesting person, and kind of like a witch painter. Oh man, she was great. Yeah, very interesting lady, interesting story, interesting life. But yeah, Computers, Consciousness and Creativity, an interview with Dr. Timothy Leary. It's got an interview with Terence McKenna about sacred plants and mystic realities. And when's this from? This is from 1994. Neville Drury. I like that dude. I still haven't read any of his books though, but I've got a few of them floating around here, don't I? I do. The Idler. Issue 37, Childish Things. The Idler is a magazine. I think it just exists online now, but it used to be in print. About 4 times a year they'd print an issue, and it was expensive. I'm not going to lie. It's a British magazine. I paid for a 4-issue subscription back in, I think it was 2005, and it cost me like $120. But it was awesome. I love these magazines. I still pick them up and read them every once in a while. There's lots in it. The Idler was originally a periodical issued by Dr. Samuel Johnson back in the 1700s. And he was, if you don't know Dr. Johnson, what are you doing reading books, mate? Come on, Dr. Johnson? Go do some reading now. Get on Wikipedia. Look up Dr. Johnson. Dr. Samuel Johnson. Samuel, not Samuel, Samuel. Just look up Dr. Johnson. He made the first dictionary. Amazing cat. And he started this thing called The Idler. He was all about just be idle. Make no waves, don't worry about it. And it's all about just taking like a not a lazy, but a not so serious approach at life. I don't know if you'll find these out there. Probably in secondhand websites. I don't know. I've never seen them in bookstores. But yeah, The Idler. Well worth a read if you can get your hands on it. Again, it's all about just kind of like lazy literature and just taking things slow, going for a fish. The importance of taking walks and thinking about nothing, and you know, not getting caught up in the whole busy cycle of life, death, birth, and rebirth. Christopher S. Hyatt, PhD, The Tree of Lies, from New Falcon Publications. Anything New Falcon I'll pick up because they published a whole heap of crazy stuff. Crazy good stuff. It's from 1992. I'd never heard about this book, and I count myself as a fan of Christopher Hyatt. He does a great book called Undoing Yourself. Undoing Yourself with Energized Meditation. Awesome book. I still read it every now and again. This is a great book too. It's kind of like it's hard to describe. It's half of it is like just essays on stuff, the big lies that society teaches you and stuff like that, and the first half is just a series of questions. I think like 300. 250 questions that you just, with like, you ask them of yourself, and then you grade how you feel about them, and you kind of use it as a workbook, and you go back to it every month or two and see how things are changing. And some of the questions are very confronting, and it's kind of like it's a psychological self-diagnosis kind of tool. I wouldn't recommend it as something that's, you know, if you're in therapy and chasing specific goals, that kind of thing, I wouldn't rely completely on this. I'd use it as a tool. Hyatt was big on the kind of nihilistic, the positives of nihilism and things like that. So, grain of salt, he'll tell you that too. But lots of fun as well. He was a fun writer in that, like, he was kind of like a tough writer, but yeah, had some cool stuff. Tree of Lies. I've never seen this around. I found that, where did I find this? I think it was at the Vinnie's in Dulwich Hill. And I count myself very lucky that I found, this is my only Christopher Hyatt book I've ever found in a second-hand shop. Introduction by Robert Anton Wilson. There you go. Umberto Eco. He died a few years ago. I was really sad when he died. Big fan of Eco. He wrote, of course, The Name of the Rose. That kind of like what cemented him in the West. Foucault's Pendulum is another great book by him. I think I've read almost all of his fiction. I've got a few books of his essays. But if you haven't read any Umberto Eco and you want to start, Bordolino is easily his most accessible for the lay reader. It's not as intense as Foucault's Pendulum or Name of the Rose. It's kind of light-hearted, but serious and funny, and explores a lot of mythology and medieval ways of life and perspectives. And you've got this kind of unreliable narrator who's in a church getting burnt in Constantinople. The church is like Constantinople's being sacked, and some guys trying to escape meet up with Bordolino, and Bordolino is this old guy, and he starts telling them stories, and then this is like, is whatever he's saying true? And it's like, well, don't know. He's an unreliable narrator. Great book. As I say, easily the most accessible Eco book. If you disagree with me on that, let me know in the comments below. What is his most accessible book? Yeah, I really like this one though. Found it quite enjoyable. It's not as much of a slog as some of his other ones, and like quite a, you know, entertaining page turner, with lots in it. Mario Vargas Llosa, Aunt Julia and the Screenwriter. Haven't read it. Tried. I think I got, oh yeah, there's a bookmark in here. Should probably take it out. More bookmarks. I got up to page 13 and I didn't continue. I got this from an ex. She was like, you should read this. And I'm like, yeah, shouldn't I? No, I do try to read books that people recommend to me. And I will try to read this. I haven't read a lot of South American literature. But, yeah, I started it. It was entertaining enough. I liked it, but I just moved on to something else and didn't pick this back up. It was made into a movie back in the 90s. I think Peter Falk. Keanu Reeves. I want to say Deborah Winger. I don't know. Can't remember. But anyway, I haven't read the book. Haven't read it. Michael Foley, The Age of Absurdity. Philosophical tome about just like the world as it is now. Or probably back in 2010. Let's have a look at the chapters here. The assault on detachment, the absurdity of work, the atrophy of experience, the loss of transcendence, the absurdity of happiness. Haven't read this book. I think I got it. I was reading one of de Botton's books about, you know, status anxiety book, and I saw this at the Salvos and I got it for a couple of bucks. Haven't read it. Michael Foley is a good writer though. I've read some of his stuff, like articles and stuff like that. But yeah, I want to read it. Just so many books, as you can see. Ambrose Bierce, The Devil's Dictionary. This is it's a little book. It's a little book, but it's full of awesomeness. It is basically The Devil's Dictionary. Published back in, when was this published? First published. It's the 1993 edition. Unabridged replication of the work originally published as volume 7 of the collected works of Ambrose Bierce in 1911. So it would have been published before then, but basically it's this A through Z dictionary and definitions on meanings of stuff. Hospitality, the virtue which induces us to feed and lodge certain persons who are not in need of food and lodging. Hope, desire and expectation rolled into one. Oppose, to assist with obstructions and objections. Optimism, the doctrine or belief that everything is beautiful, including what is ugly, everything good, especially the bad, and everything right that is wrong. It is held with greatest tenacity by those most accustomed to the mischance of falling into adversity, and is most acceptably expounded with the grin that apes a smile. Being a blind faith, it is inaccessible to the light of disproof. An intellectual disorder, yielding to no treatment but death. It is hereditary, but fortunately not contagious. Optimism. Yeah, this was a bathroom book of mine for a while, and it's a good book. Gout, a physician's name for the rheumatism of a rich patient. Rheumatism. Gout. Yeah, it's got some awesome, funny, kind of for back then, kind of dangerous, very witty. Yeah, it's hard to describe. It's great. It's a great book. You ever see it, find it, read it. Again, it's not something you have to read cover to cover. You just pick it up, put it down. C.S. Knott. Teachings of Gurdjieff. A Pupil's Journal. C.S. Knott was one of, along with Ouspensky, one of the great recorders of Gurdjieff's works and interpretations of his works. Because Gurdjieff, although he wrote like 5 or so books, he was very vague in what he meant, purposefully. But through writers like Knott and Ouspensky and Nicol, for example, you get ways to interpret his teachings and his works. And I think I've flipped through this a little bit. You got to be in a Gurdjieff kind of state of mind to read about Gurdjieff. You can't just like pick him up and start reading. It's like you'll just be like, ugh. you gotta get there first. Got this at Salvo's Marrickville. Gotta get a lot of books at Salvo's and Marrickville. I used to. I don't live there anymore, so getting them from otherwhere now. So Knott was born back in 1887. He died in 1978. Yeah, so this one, I think he was American. No, so he was British, and he recorded stuff in this book from when Gurdjieff was in New York and in Fontainebleau, the kind of French commune he set up in the 40s. I think it was the 40s. Probably before that, 20s. Yeah. I think he died in the 40s or 50s, Gurdjieff. Yeah, interesting guy, that Gurdjieff guy. Ooh. you want to go down some rabbit holes, start reading about him. Last but not least by any small stretch, Ernest Scott, The People of the Secret. I got this in a box of books from New Dawn magazine when I was writing for them. It was originally published in 1983. This is a 1991 edition. This is easily one of my favorite books about mysticism, spirituality, tools for such things, histories. It's kind of like in the vein of, like, you know, von Daniken, Thomas, Morning of the Magicians, just a bunch of different subjects all kind of linking together. And Ernest Scott was, I read this book and I loved it, like, straight away. And I was like, who was Ernest Scott? And he was like a bit of a journeyman writer, starting out in the 50s. And he wrote this book, which it turns out is all about Sufism, and how the Sufis were, you know, probably around before Islam, and how Sufism in its many varied forms probably started like way ago. But the way they survived and the way their teachings survived is that they just kind of jump into whatever religion was kind of top of the heap at the time and adapt themselves to that so they would ensure their survival. Yeah, it's great. I'd never thought about that with Sufis before I read this book, and I was like, wow, okay, maybe they have been around for a while. Yeah, I've read a bit about the Sufis over the years. There's one guy who wrote a really good book about them, Abraham something. I've got one of his other books. I used to have it. It's called The Sufis. I used to have a copy of that, and I really liked it. I don't know what happened to it. I think I gave it to someone and never got it back, as you do. I've never seen this in a bookshop, let alone a second-hand bookshop, let alone an op shop. I haven't looked for it online, not in a long time anyway. But if you're into that kind of stuff, if you're into like history of mysticism and secret teachings and stuff like that, Kabbalah, Tarot, alchemy, the alchemists, love troubadours. Like, where the troubadours come from? What are they doing? A hidden tradition, a secret directorate. Awesome book. I would highly recommend it to anyone if you're a Graham Hancock fan, or Robert Anton Wilson, or von Daniken. You're just kind of like reading about that kind of stuff. This is a great book. You may not have heard of it, but I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic read. This is when I was going through my A4 writing pages, and I basically filled up almost both sides with notes. Again, I just get a page and fold it into fours and use it as my bookmark and write little bits. So page 166, the source, capital S, source. The source is not attracted by heroism, but by capacity and ability to respond to its messages. Shakespeare, a team of writers working to inject certain ideas into Elizabethan England. 190, the Sufic impulse. It is indirect, a provoking of action technique, depending for its effort on what would now be called subliminal response. Its real action is therefore unnoticed, and the connection between its many forms in many countries is unsuspected. This applies alike to adherents and outside observers. Yeah, so Sufism, stuff like that. Yeah. Cool book. I love this book, and I love having it in my collection, and I love picking it up every once in a while and just dipping in and out. Read it cover to cover a couple of times. Use it for research. Great book. Ernest Scott, People of the Secret. I'm going to end it there today. Thanks for tuning in to all the 700,000 hours of YouTube that's uploaded every day. I'm very thankful you decided to watch this. I hope I haven't waffled on too long. I really like the stack today. And if you've got any comments, if you read any of these and you want to chime in and go, hey, I read it too, it's cool. Have a discussion. Hit me up in the comments below. More than happy to interact. You know. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And I'll see you next time on One Foot of Books. Peace out.